Welcome to episode 2 of the Chall podcast. My name is Preston Byers and I'm with Justin Binkowski. Um, if you got last episode, the first real episode, we went through the week one results, and we did what we thought would be week two predictions. But because of the mass power outages across like Texas and southern United States, the CDL actually made a super week. And so that's going to be 20 matches over 7 consecutive days, starting on Monday, February 22nd, I think. Um, since we already did the first 10 matches, we're going to go through the final 10 matches and we're going to predict who we think is going to win. And that's what we're going to do this episode. Um,
Um,
you have any opening thoughts, I guess, Bink?
Oh, just excited to be back. Thanks for everybody tuning in now and everybody who's tuned into the first episode. We appreciate the support and let's have a good time talking about some Call of Duty.
Yep, agreed. So the first 10 matches run from Monday through the second match of Thursday, and then the first week three match, I guess, of Super Week is on Thursday, February 25th. Atlanta FaZe versus Florida Mutineers. Who do you got there?
It, so we're starting with the matches we didn't do.
What do you mean?
This is the first match we didn't do a
Yeah.
prediction for,
Or do you
right?
want to go
Yeah.
through the other ones?
I thought we were just going to talk about the other ones, but it doesn't really matter to me. So Atlanta, Florida, this is a rematch from the Kickoff Classic, and obviously Florida won that match. But again, as we've said the past couple times on here, we're not trying to take too much away from the Kickoff Classic. We don't know how much each team was trying, all that, yeah, pre-season, stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Atlanta looked strong in search against Optic, and Florida won both the searches against Atlanta in the Kickoff Classic. So I think if Atlanta's playing better in search now, they should be able to take the series. So I will say Atlanta 3-1.
Yeah, I'll go with Atlanta 3-0. Um, I mean, I don't really know, like you said, kickoff, we don't really know how much teams are putting into it. When I talked with Sem, he said that it was just kind of their search was where it was at. Like they didn't practice a lot. They didn't really have a lot of info on other teams and how they played it. So it was just kind of going in blind and hoping for the best. So I think in that regard, we should kind of disregard everything from kickoff. And Atlanta looked good. It looked great in search against Optic, and they beat LAG as well. So I think that's pretty good. I would say Atlanta 3-0 because I don't think Florida's really going to touch them in respawns, although they did beat Toronto in control.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think the tough thing we were talking about earlier is like this is the last match on Thursday, and if there wasn't the situation in Texas and there wasn't the Super Week, this would be the first match of the third week of Stage One group play. So
mhm.
we would have gotten to see Florida play, a couple more matches. Whereas the only match we've seen them play that really meant something was that series against Toronto in Week One, where they got upset. So Florida could come out of the gates hot this week. I don't remember exactly who they start with.
They play
They
LAG.
play,
They're the first match of the week.
and they play Paris.
Yeah.
So like Florida wins both of those two matches, they could, look better than they did the week before, gain some momentum, and they might be able to do some damage. But again, that's the tough part about predicting now that we got a super week where there's so many matches that we're planning ahead for.
Yeah.
But I still think it's you got to go with Atlanta for this one.
Yeah, like you said, Florida, they play 2 matches before this one in the week, and Atlanta only plays Toronto, and that's a Monday game. So they have several days off. They play on Monday, and then they have Tuesday, Wednesday off, and then they play on Thursday. Whereas Florida's playing Monday and Tuesday, they have Wednesday off, and then they play Thursday. I don't know. I think, like you said, because Florida has, like, they don't have, like, the hardest schedule, so they could get some momentum going and actually be able to beat Atlanta or take like a map or whatever off of Atlanta. But I still think Atlanta's too strong of a team, even if Florida gets 2 pretty easy wins earlier in the week.
Yeah, that's I think it's important to just at least
Yeah,
point out that they have those matches ahead of time, and we're gonna have to roll the dice. But I still think Atlanta's the safe bet here.
Yeah. So that is the last match on Thursday. The first match on Friday, LA Thieves versus the London Royal Ravens. Who do you got, Bink?
Should be LA Thieves 3-0. I don't think I think on its earlier matches in this first week are pretty tough. If I remember right, they play New York and Dallas before playing
Hmm.
Thieves. So I think it's gonna be a rough week for London. Obviously playing some of those top teams in their group, and they still, in my eyes, they are at one of the biggest disadvantages in the league just because of their lack of practice with Parasite compared to the practice that other teams have with their current rosters. So I think this should be a 3-0 for the Thieves. If it's not a 3-0, I would kind of be surprised.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I hate that we agree on so much, but
Yeah.
a lot of these are. I mean, Atlanta, Florida could turn out to be very interesting if
Mhm.
Florida plays to their potential. But this is a matchup where LA Thieves looked really, really good in week one. And London, I don't think they looked bad or anything considering their circumstances, but
Yeah.
we don't think that their ceiling is nearly as high as the Thieves are. So I'm going to say LA Thieves 3-0. I think they're very strong in hard point. They showed that against Minnesota and who was their second match against New York. Although New York did give them a good showing. Um, yeah, but London lost to Seattle, and I don't think Seattle is nearly as good as LA, so I'll go LA 3-0.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one, Toronto and Paris.
I mean, I don't want us to have the same picks, but I can't see Paris winning this as much as I want to say I want Paris to win this one. Just looking at the matches before this one, Paris plays Florida, and that might be their only
They play
match
Atlanta
before.
the day after, so they play on Saturday against Atlanta. So this is
So the
their
only
middle
match,
match.
yeah. So the only match before this one is against Florida. You would think Florida takes that match,
Hmm.
and that probably means Paris doesn't have any momentum going into this. Who knows? But I'm just gonna go Toronto 3-1.
I think Toronto 3-0. Paris, I think they took control off of LAG and the second hard point, and
Yeah, it was
Toronto
almost a
is
reverse sweep.
yeah, Toronto's a good hard point team, and I think Toronto lost the control, so maybe there is that opportunity for a 3-1, but Toronto is better than Florida in my opinion, so I'll say Toronto 3-0.
But I also think it's worth mentioning too. Toronto plays Optic and Atlanta
Yeah, they could
before
be
this match,
demoralized, like literally.
so or they cause a couple upsets against those top teams. They could come out real hot and
Mm.
stomp Paris. So who knows? But I really just, if like you said, I think 3-1 just in the sense Toronto looks good in hard points. So I don't think it gets to beyond those two hard points. Paris might be able to steal the search or the control, but other than that, I'm sticking with Toronto for this one.
Toronto has that really weird, like you said, Toronto has this weird schedule where if they win all three of their matches, they're instantly thought of as probably the best or like second best team in the league because of who they beat to get there. But if they lose two of the three matches, they're thinking like everybody would think, oh well, they're just like a middle of the road team. So this is a very
Mm-hmm.
big week in terms of perception for them. In Paris, I mean, they're gonna get screwed because I mean they could. I think they play Florida is like you. I think you said.
They play
Yeah.
Florida on Tuesday. Yeah.
So that's their probably most winnable match. And then this, and then obviously they play Atlanta. So this is a very tough week for them because they don't want to go 0-5 to start the season.
Yeah.
That's a horrific start for them. Um, or maybe it's 0-6. I'm not sure. Don't know how to do math. Uh, all right.
No, it would be they played Optic and LAG first week. So that means. Oh wait, no.
No, that's all right because there's
Yeah,
only
5. There's
yeah,
16. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I got caught up on that one too.
No, you're good. You're good.
Dallas versus New York is the last match of Friday. This is actually definitely the best match of this day. Who do you got? Empire versus Subliners.
I mean, we saw this in the kickoff classic, 3-0 stomp. Dallas smoked them, and Clay was tweeting it was a glorified scrim, all that stuff. So this is actually his real first match against his former teammates from last year. And I think he's going to bring the fire. And I really want to say he comes out and takes it. But I think as long as Dallas, I don't want to say figured out what went wrong in the last week because, they're still one of the top teams in the game in my eyes. But as long as they don't have another series, I think, where they lose both searches, I see them taking this. I'm going to say Dallas 3-1.
I'll actually go with New York just to kind of differ from here. I do think that um, Dallas has looked better. Obviously, we've only seen really one real series from New York, and it
Yeah.
was an incredibly close
Yep.
series with what I think is a top four team in LA. So who knows how good New York really is? And this is another week or a week and a half of practice that they have with this roster. Since Zuma and I mean, obviously, we probably need to talk about Hydra potentially coming to America next month. But with this roster, they have a little more practice. They were very close to taking actually all three maps against LA. I think there's the potential for an upset. I think if Mac plays up to his potential, he played very poorly in the first week, and I think that is a very uncharacteristic thing from him. So if he plays better and this team comes together more, I definitely think they could upset Dallas, and I'll say they will 3-2 because we did see that Dallas lost both search and or right is that right? They lost both search and destroys against Minnesota. Yeah.
Correct.
So they have that. I don't know if it's a weakness per se, but it's definitely not something that they're invulnerable with.
I think it's also important to, like we were talking about previously, with this big week going on. New York kicks off with London. They should be able to take that match. And then on Thursday, they have a really important match against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were looking at this match, as in it's week 3, we would be able to gauge how New York played against Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
If New York beats Minnesota, then it's like, oh crap, maybe they will take down Dallas, and you're picking them either way. But I think that matchup, New York versus Minnesota, will tell us a lot about what we can actually expect from New York versus Dallas.
I agree, and I picked New York in that
Yep.
Minnesota match. So I think that, like I said, I think there is a lot of potential in this roster. With any Clayster roster, you can't count them out because he's an incredible leader. He's very talented, and he always has very talented young players around him that will listen to him and will try to work as a team. And I think he could do that with New York. I think they uh, they needed that kind of veteran presence with Clayster, and hopefully he does figure it out and they do really well. Let's
Do
move on
you,
to what you were saying.
do you want to talk about Hydra, or you want to
Yeah,
wait?
let's talk about Hydra. So this was according to our boy Crone at Cdl Intel. I don't know if that's actually the Intel at Intel Call of Duty on Twitter. He tweeted earlier today, sources Hydra of subliners have secured his visa. If everything goes to plan, he'll leave France next month. Um, so that's really big news for this team because they took two big hits in the off season or preseason or whatever because of Hydra not being able to secure a visa to come to America and obviously practice and play with his team. So he's been tearing it up in challengers, and then they also had Zoom's retirement. What do you think of Hydra potentially coming to the subliners maybe a little bit after Major One?
Yeah, so that's what the first thing we say. If he leaves France, what was the exact wording? He said leaves France next month.
Yeah, if everything goes to plan, he'll leave France next month.
Yeah, okay. So looking at the CDL schedule for the season, barring any other changes, stage two is set there. Week 1 of stage two is the week of March 18th. Week two, stage two, March 25th. Third week is April 1st, and then the major is the week of April 5th. So if he's able to get here, If he leaves France in the month, he might be able to be inserted into the lineup by the end of the stage 2 group play, maybe before the stage 2 major.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how New York performs, we might not see him till stage 3. If New York catches fire, who knows what happens? Obviously, we've only seen one match from them so far, so it's a little tough to tell what they're going to do. But if they struggle, I think and Hydra gets here and he's playing well, I think it's pretty safe to say that they're going to try to find a way to get him in the lineup. Now, the bigger question that we were talking about earlier is who do you replace him with? Because obviously Clayster's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like ASIM would have been the answer, just if you're looking at the lineup on paper potentially, just from a role standpoint, because I'm pretty sure they're both aggressive sub players. But if Mac is underperforming and Diamond Khan is still playing well, I don't think they're gonna, bench Diamond Khan if he keeps on performing well. And ASIM played pretty well, and then he wasn't like dropping superstar numbers, but ASIM's that guy who is going to set the pace for your team, and it's if Mac is underperforming, it might mean Hydra comes in for Mac. I think it's going to be tough. We're obviously just speculating right now because again, we've only seen one match from New York, but it's definitely something to look at. And who knows if Crone sources are accurate, this could be a motivation thing for New York. Those other guys, obviously, Clayster's not going anywhere. But Mac, Diamond Con, and ASIM all here. Hydra's coming to town. They're like, oh crap, we have to turn up. My job's on the line. So, well, there's a lot that could go into the decision behind Hydra getting in the starting lineup eventually. But I think it's definitely something that all CDL fans are going to have to keep an eye on, at
Yeah.
least in stage 2, heading into stage 3, based on timing.
Like if I had to take a bet, I would say that it's gonna be Asim just because he was the last person to enter this lineup, and like I have this belief that Mac is better than he showed in week one. So if he plays better, then you would assume that he's not going to just be tossed aside. But if like you say he does continue to do bad, and the team struggles as a result, I definitely could see him replacing Mac. I think Diamond Khan is an AR, correct?
Yes. So
So
that's what the biggest thing is.
yeah, the
So
roles don't match up for him.
you can make the case for Hydra replacing Mac, Diamond Khan, or ASIM, in my opinion. But looking at the roles, I believe when they brought in Diamond Khan, they were saying Mac wanted, or I'm pretty sure it was Clayster who tweeted that Mac wanted to run a sub anyway. So if you replace Hydra with Diamond Khan, Mac most likely has to run a second AR with Clayster. Or if you replace Diamond Khan with Hydra, then it's
Yeah,
Clayster, Hydra, Mac, and ASIM. Mac most likely has to become that second AR. And if he wants to run a sub, that might not work out. So, you know, again, it's kind of early, but I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. It's going to be interesting to see how it all works out.
yeah. Unless I think they're in this weird position too because, like you said, if they do well, say they get to like the semifinals of the first major with this roster, and then Hydra comes to America, do you make that roster change because you're at say the top four, you're in this upper echelon of the league, you have this opportunity. He's supposed to be some French phenom who's supposed to kind of be like a simp who can do anything, and he's very talented, but he also has no chemistry with this team, and you actually have chemistry with your existing four. So do you make that move when you have done X, Y, and Z, and you've already made it to top four or even top two?
And I think, like you said, Simp, it's interesting because not like we're going to compare Hydra to Simp. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
if they're on the same caliber, but when Simp made his pro debut, it was on a team with Clayster, and I'm pretty sure Simp has said in the past that it was Clayster who, obviously with the United management and stuff, they were pushing to get Simp in the lineup instead of JCap. So Clayster's done the sort of thing before with a mid-season roster swap and bringing in the young gun, and it led to him winning a world championship. So he could be looking to make that move again. But like you said, it's if they're seeing success and they haven't had a lot of practice with Hydra, it might not make sense. But I think he's so hyped up that unless they win the first major, I feel like they're gonna at least practice with him and see how things go from there.
Benzie asked a question. He said, "What if Hydra is a bust?" And I mean, I think it's a very real question, especially like we're saying, if New York does well in stage one and they have momentum going into stage two. If you replace him, or if you replace, say, Mac or Asim or Diamond Khan with Hydra, and Hydra ends up being not as good as they believed, or not, he didn't make the impact like you thought, what happens? Like, who's to blame for that? Like, because you essentially dismantled a team's momentum to try to push in this new guy.
I mean, it's just a little different in COD compared to traditional sports, but it's no different than having the number one overall pick in the draft in football, basketball, etc., and having that rookie make his debut. Like that's essentially what New York thinks they have a top prospect, and they're they're, they're not going to not play him. I feel like he's going to get a shot at some point, and it might not be right when he comes to America, but or they could throw him in the fire right away. You don't really know, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's definitely with how hyped up he's been, and they wanted him to be a starter at the start of the season before the visa issues happened. So obviously, they believe that he's talented and they want to play with him. So I don't think the what if he's a bust question really, if he's a bust, and then they're gonna have to make another move. But I think the only way they're gonna find out is if he actually ends up playing.
Yeah. I also think, like, if you take it to real sports, you could blame the general manager or the head coach or something, and those people get fired because the team didn't perform up to standard. That's not the case with COD. Like, Revan is not going to get fired
No.
because this team didn't perform. I don't know who like signs the contracts for subliners, but they're probably not going to get fired if this team doesn't perform. It's going to be Clayster, Mac, Asim. Like, the players suffer the most when teams don't perform well, and that is a very like esports heavy issue. That's not a real sports thing. Like, coaches are more likely to be tossed aside than a very popular player.
And
Uh,
go
oh,
ahead.
no, I was just gonna transition if you had any lasting thoughts on the topic.
I was just gonna say, like you said, esports centric, but like the players have more power too, in the sense of who they want to actually play with. Like a lot of roster moves and stuff are based on that. So if Clayster and those guys want to play with Hydra, I feel like it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
if they practice with him and it doesn't work out, then I guess that's when the what if Hydra is a bust question comes into play. But other than that, I see him coming to America, them at least practicing with them, and if they scrim well and they look good in scrims, I think he gets his shot by stage three, maybe end of stage two.
Hmm. I think that was a good discussion about that topic. It's obviously going to be a very difficult decision unless New York just kind of bombs out of stage one, and then
Yeah,
you,
and that's the toughest part because they've literally played one match.
yeah, we have no idea what kind of team this could be. I think the power ranking said they were like eighth or something, and that was basically with like a month of practice with their current roster. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we'll see. Be maybe they'll be really fucking good for the rest of the season. But we'll see. So let's get back to our predictions. Saturday, February 27th, the first match of the day. Kind of a very lopsided match. Atlanta FaZe versus Paris Legion.
Atlanta 3-0.
Atlanta 3-0. We're not going to talk about it. Minnesota versus London. So we got Rocker, who has not won a hard point. I mean, they presumably would have won at least one by this point, versus London, who has a pretty tough schedule leading up to this match.
I'm gonna also assume that they've won at least one hard point. I'll say Minnesota 3-1.
Yeah, Minnesota 3-1. London looks competent in every game mode, I would assume. That's how I would characterize it. Minnesota has obviously looked weak in hardpoint, but in my interview with Attach, it'll be coming to .esports.com either tomorrow. It'll probably come tomorrow. Um, he basically said that they're one or two hills away every time from winning those matches, and they should be able to fix those things. So yeah, I'll say Minnesota 3-1 as well. Um, Last match of Saturday, we got Toronto versus LAG. Who do you got?
Um, oh man, this is a tough one for Benzie because Toronto versus Apathy. Man, I guess I'm gonna pick Toronto. I'm trying to think of what score I want to go with, but according to Benzie, Toronto's the best hardpoint team in the game, so I guess I'll say 3-1.
A small sample size with only two hard points. Uh,
And they're like we talked about earlier, they're gonna be playing Optic and Phase, so I think that's a much better test if
mhm.
they are able to take it, especially against Optic in my eyes, who they looked, especially with that close match against Phase in hardpoint, the 250, 245 on Moscow. They, even when Optic lost that hardpoint, it was close. So I think Optic's going to be one of the better respawn teams. So if Toronto matches up with them well in their match against hardpoint, I think it might mean something towards Toronto being one of those top hardpoint teams, according to Benzie. But I still think Toronto should be able to take this match.
Yeah, I'd say 3-1 Toronto. I think LG is the superior Surge team, but Toronto looks
Yep.
to be a very good respawn team. I don't know if they're the best, but like you said, we'll see after they play FaZe and Optic if they can win both of those matches. I think I predicted they would beat Optic. If they beat Optic, I would say they're probably one of the best hardpoint teams. They'd have to be like at least in the top three to beat that kind of team. Um, but yeah, I think LAG is not as good in respawn, but
Yeah,
they're going
that's
to be
a,
good in search. So,
yep.
and then we have two matches, or no, three matches. One of them is just down here for some reason. Three matches on Sunday to conclude Super Week. The first match is New York versus Seattle. Who do you got in this?
New York 3-0.
Okay, so you're not buying into Seattle's 1-1 week at all.
Well, I just don't know. I mean, I think New York wins this. The 3-0 might be a bit of an over exaggeration, but like if you think about it, what mode do you think Seattle is better than New York in?
I don't know. Probably
That's what
control
I
or something.
off the top of my head, I don't. We saw New York play tough against LA Thieves in all three game modes. So if again, this is a Sunday match, literally a week in advance, and we've only seen one match from New York, but I still think New York is the better team on paper, so I'll go with them.
I mean, I picked New York to beat Dallas
Yeah.
and Minnesota, so I think they should take care of Seattle. I'll say New York 3-0. Like you said, like when you put it that way, can you see Seattle beating New York in any game mode? It's like no, like you really can't. If Gunless pops off like he did last week and Octane plays better than he did, yeah, I think Seattle could steal a map or whatever. But this team isn't built for search. This is like none of the players are really known for being incredible in search. Um,
You could argue Looney, but that's about it in my opinion.
yeah, so I don't think that they're better in any game mode than the subliners, and I think the subliners are a lot better just overall. So yeah, I'll say New York 3-0. All right. This could be an interesting match depending on how Florida is performing
Yep.
this week. Optic Chicago versus Florida Mutineers.
I'll let you go first.
I'll say Optic 3-0. I think I think Florida is better than they showed. I've been saying that, and so have you. But I also think Optic is one of the best teams. They went toe to toe with Atlanta last week. Like you said, they were literally a kill or two away from beating FaZe. So I think they can take care of Florida.
I'm gonna, for the sake of the podcast, I think Optic ends up taking this one, but just for the prediction, I'll go Florida 3-2. It would be much easier to make a Florida prediction, in my opinion, if we had more than one match to go off of. If this
Yeah,
was actually the last match of week 3, we'd have already seen how Florida looked against some of these, weaker teams on paper. and who knows, they might be figuring stuff out, and they might look better in search. They still did beat FaZe and two searches in that kickoff classic. So I think if Florida is able to pull off this, you got to consider it an upset. If Florida is able to pull off the upset, it would be 3-2 with Florida taking the searches. I still think Optic ends up doing it, but just for prediction's sake, I'll go with Florida 3-2.
Not just for prediction's sake, but if, say, Florida is able to force a game five, who would you say wins, Optic or Florida?
It should be Florida in search. I mean, they have a good search team,
Mm-hmm.
but it's tough. Um, skies versus formal. That's kind of comes down to Neptune versus Envoy a little bit. I don't know. It's interesting. I think I think Optic ends up taking this one, but I'm I guess I'll go with the upset.
Mm-hmm. Well, we actually have a good match to end the
Yeah,
last one. The last match of Super Week is the Dallas Empire versus the Los Angeles Thieves. Who do you have? Dallas, LA.
I'll let you take this one first too.
All right, I think Dallas, although LA looked really good in their two matches, I think Dallas will have improved from their losses against Minnesota. I think just shoring up S&D, they should be better. So I'll say, and LA. So LA and Dallas both played Minnesota in Week 1. They both lost search and destroy to Minnesota. I I don't know. It's really hard to say which one is better because obviously we only have one match, or we have two matches of Dallas and like two matches of LA. It's I'll just say Dallas 3-1 for just the sake of this.
Yep. I think I would go with Dallas too, but for the sake of the argument, I think if Dallas wins, it's going to be Dallas. Or sorry, I think if LA Thieves wins, it's going to be LA Thieves 3-1. If it gets that game five, I think Dallas takes it. You know, I think they are a better search team than the Thieves, even though they might not have showed it in the last match that we've seen them play. But I think the important thing to note here is that this is most likely the match for first place in Group A, because going into this week at least, Thieves are 2-0 and Dallas is 1-1. So, assuming there's no crazy upsets along the way, if both teams win every matchup before this one, Atlanta would be LA Thieves would be 4-0,
Mm,
Dallas would be 3-1. There would probably, because Minnesota and Dallas already played, and if Minnesota wins all their games, there could be a three-way tiebreaker at the top. So who knows how it shakes out? But this could be potentially be the match for first place in their group, which is obviously a big deal heading into the major for seeding's sake. So I think obviously it'll be a close match, two really good teams. But again, if it's tough because Dallas looked really good in hardpoint, obviously,
yep.
and I think they should be a better search team than the Thieves, even if they struggled against Minnesota in search. So I think I'll go with the Thieves, but I think it's going to be Thieves 3-1 or Dallas 3-2.
Okay. I think
It's tough though.
I think if my predictions were to come true, it would be a three-way tie between LA, Dallas, and New York for the Group A first place. And then I mean, I'm just going off memory. I think the way they do tiebreakers is head to head first, and then I don't
Well,
know.
no, you picked New York to beat Dallas, right?
Did I?
Yeah, you did.
All
I
right, so
believe
that'd
so.
be New York and oh
It would
god,
just be a two-way tie, which
yeah.
would mean Thieves would come in first.
But did I pick the Thieves to actually lose anything other than this Dallas game?
I don't think so because they play London.
Yeah, so
Who
it
else
would
did they
be they would
play?
all be 5-1, right?
Who did you pick Thieves to lose to?
Dallas. We just picked them. What am I doing? Dallas.
But you had Dallas losing to New York, I'm saying, so Dallas would
Oh,
have two
okay.
losses.
So New York and LA, and then it would be whoever won that head to head, which LA did. So LA would be
Yeah,
the first seed.
so LA Thieves play Seattle and then London and then Dallas.
Mhm.
So assuming everything goes according to plan against London and Seattle, the Thieves should be 4-0 going into this matchup
Yeah, so it would be a tiebreaker between New York and LA in my prediction.
for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it would probably
But
be
it's not a tiebreaker because it would be head to head and Thieves beat them 3-0.
yeah, but it'd be interesting. Like
Yeah.
essentially, Rocker who beat Dallas would probably be the 4 seed in that scenario, which would mean they'd probably like they have to play like probably Optic or Toronto, and I think that's how they do it in this bracket.
I
Um,
guess we can do that real quick too. Not even going unless you want to go based off what we
no,
predicted.
I mean we didn't
Um,
plan for that, and I think it would take a little too much time or
okay.
kind of brain power to figure it out. I was just going off base of like I know New York would win their remaining matches, and then LA would win their remaining matches until the last one. But yeah, it would basically in my scenario it would be LA, then New York, then Dallas, then Minnesota, then I believe Seattle, and then London. I don't think I predicted London to win any match in Group A. So
Yeah, but that's still crazy just to point out because I mean off the top of my head and based because I picked Minnesota to beat New York and Minnesota already played LA and Dallas, so in my scenario I would have New York in fourth in Group A,
yeah,
whereas you're potentially having them in first. So I guess that's kind of cool.
yeah, I think, and I believe that the way they're gonna do it is like the first place team in Group A would no. How is this? I just have to look it up just to look at the
I
entire
have the
bracket.
bracket in the
So
scores
so
article.
like the number one seed gets like a
They
two
get a
round bye or something.
they get a bye into the second round of winners bracket. So they're
Gotcha.
in winners
Semis.
semis.
So it's kind of like
Wow.
champs, like how they did champs
Yep.
last year. Okay, so that makes sense. Obviously there's a great deal of importance being put on that first seed. If you get that first
Yeah.
seed, you're guaranteed like what top 4, 6 or something. Whereas if you get 5 or 6, you're kind of fucked because it's a single elimination, and you lose that first game, you're out. I don't think you get any money from the split. So, and then
Yeah.
in Group B, I'm sure I picked Phase first, and then probably Ultra, and then Chicago, Florida, LAG, Paris. Is there
That's
any
tough too.
I mean, Chicago and Ultra would probably be, and I guess Florida because they only played one match, so they have four this
I'm
week.
saying like that's such a big match between Florida and Toronto because if they end up with the same record, Toronto has the head to head. So if Toronto is the three, just because Toronto won their match, Toronto could get the 3 seed over Florida,
Hmm.
and Florida's starting in the losers bracket. So that could have major implications on that group too.
Yeah, I'm like it just feels because we smash these weeks together that everything is so quick, and because after this week we have the first major, and
Yeah.
like with Florida and New York and London, they only played one match, so they're playing four this week, and they're literally deciding where they're seated in the major this week. It just feels crazy because we didn't have that kind of buffer between week 2 and 3 to kind of like look at everything and say, okay, this is what this team needs to do in their final 2 matches or whatever to get to that second or third seed.
Yep. It's gonna be a lot of fun. A lot of Call of Duty this week. That's for sure.
Yep, 20 matches over 7 days starting on Monday, February 22nd. That is the Super Week. We have done our predictions for the Super Week. If you want to go and check out our other 10 predictions, go to the first episode. We went through all 10 of them, gave our predictions and the scores and everything. So you can do that. So I think that's about it. I don't know if we have any other stuff to talk about.
If anybody has any questions in the chat, we can take a
Yeah.
couple questions. But other than that, I don't really have much. I think unfortunately, this side of obviously, I hope everything gets resolved with the situation in Texas, and it was necessary that we had to consolidate the schedule, or the CDL had to consolidate the schedule and form the Super Week. And I think there's some positives and negatives to it, from the sense that, obviously we get a lot of matches to watch this week, but just from a prediction standpoint, it makes our job a little tougher.
Hmm.
But it's definitely should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, like Bink said, just drop them in the chat. We'll answer them before we hop off here. And like you said, it has made our job in predicting very difficult because we don't have much information on any team, especially teams that only played, 3 or 4 maps. So that's it's always difficult. Um, Benzie said Krim should have been dropped over Clay. Thoughts? I don't know if there's a. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've thought about it. I think, from a like not looking at stats or anything like that, just like thinking about it from a team perspective, they weren't going to drop Shotzi, Illy, or Hook. Like, those three were staying together no matter what. So
Nope.
obviously, Krim and Clay, one of them had to be the odd man out. And I think that you can make the argument for either of them staying or either of them going, but Krim winning his third championship and having as much accolades as he has in the past, it makes it tougher for him to be the one to be dropped, because you're dropping the GOAT in COD.
Yeah.
And Clayster's always had that reputation, even though back to denial, thrown into the wolves, all that, he's always seemingly being the guy who gets, I don't want to say gets screwed over, but he's the one who gets thrown to the wolves, and he has to come out leading the pack. So he's done it before, so I think that made the decision a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but I think that might have contributed to the decision to drop Clay over Krim. But I think, there's an argument that some people could make. I don't know which one. If I was in Hastro's position, I don't really know. I think it would have been really tough, but yeah.
I don't think there was a bad decision in terms of like who you're gonna keep because you're either so you have the 3-time world champion who has won more championships than anybody else in Call of Duty, or you have another 3-time champion
Yeah.
who's won back-to-back world titles and seemingly always kind of gets the best out of his roster. So I mean, it's either you have this incredible player or this incredible player, and they're both leaders, they're both veterans. I don't know if you can pick a wrong player in that scenario. I
And the Go
no, what
ahead.
were you gonna say? I don't
I
think that I don't think that Benzie's statement that Clay is more of a leader than Krim is. I don't think that's like I don't know if you could actually say that because I think they're both incredible leaders. They've obviously showed that.
I just think too, it's worth mentioning at least. I don't know if this went into the decision, obviously, but Clay, as you said, won back to back champs to get to his 3 rings, but those 2 champs were in 5v5,
Hmm.
and the game was transitioning to 4v4, where Krim is, regardless of 4v4 or 5v5, he's the winningest player in Call of Duty. So maybe that had some influence in the decision. I don't think we'll ever know, but I think that's at least worth mentioning, that maybe in the eyes of the Empire organization, they think Krim performs better in 4v4.
Well, I
Not
think
sure.
also they have. I mean, Krim has this fan base, as does Clayster, but Krim spent years and years in Optic in like the golden age of Optic. He won a world championship with them, and he has existing fans that maybe support Empire or solely him because of his time with Optic. And maybe I don't know. Like we'll never probably get an answer from Hastro on this, like a definitive like why Krim over Clay. But Krim's fan base and his legacy, it could very well may have played a factor in all of this.
Yeah, and I think Benzie brings up a good point. He's saying he doesn't think Krim is a layer, more of a role player. And I think that if looking at optic teams in the past, people have said they've struggled in search, mainly because they haven't had that IGL type player or that figure. And if you're in the camp where you think Krim might not be a leader, regardless of what you think in the past, now he has to be the leader on that Empire team.
Hmm.
Like when you pick him over Clayster, he has to be. And he's not playing with Aches anymore. He's not. I mean, I guess you can maybe say Karma was the leader of the Optic dynasty. I'm not really sure. I think that was more of like a collaborative effort on Optic. But if you don't think Krim was a leader in the past, he's getting to that point in his career where he has to be the leader, in my opinion.
Yeah, I when the Empire guys from last season would talk about their team, they'd always say like, there's the two veterans. You'd have Clay and Krim, both like a lot older than their teammates, a lot more experience like in competitions, and then you had the three kids basically. You had Illy and Shotzi, who are both 18 at the time, and Hook is like what 20, 21 or something like that. So you had kind of this disparity, and I don't know if Krim being in that position last year and having this kind of relationship with the three young guys has helped him kind of transition into the leader for this team. I mean it's very difficult to say one way or the other on like who's a better choice to lead this 4v4 team.
And the other thing, we don't have to talk much more on this, but the other thing, Hastro very easily could have went to Shotzi, Hook, and Illy, and then who do you want to play with, Krim or
Yeah.
Clay? And if all three of them said Krim, like Astro's gonna pick Krim, like he's not gonna pick Clay after that. So
Mhm.
obviously we don't know if that happened, but it's definitely, I feel like when this transition from 5v5 to 4v4, it's possible that that's a conversation that was had before the decision was made. But it
Yeah.
also, it's a really tough because they won champs and the next day 4v4 gets announced and Clayster is dropped. And I think, I see both sides to it where obviously Clayster, it sucks for him. He doesn't really get to celebrate champs with his
Yeah.
teammates and stuff and enjoy that. But on the other hand, he had just as much of a chance to find a team for this year as every other free agent because of, Dallas giving him that opportunity to seek other options. So I think just to circle back to the main start of the argument, it's either way you can look at it. I don't know. It'll depend on how successful Dallas is this year,
Yeah.
where we know if Dallas made the right choice. But I'm not sure what I would have done in the situation because I think they're both good players. And either way, I think Dallas is a good team with Krim or Clay and the three XEO guys. But yeah, I guess we'll have to wait until the season concludes, or later on down the road where we figure out how this move shakes up and what it means for the organization as a whole.
Yeah, either way, I think if anyone definitively said like, "Oh, this is like such a great decision, so much better than like going with Clay," and like I think there will be people at the end of the season, say Dallas wins another championship, where they were like, "Oh, I knew all along that Krim was the right choice to lead this team." I think that's bullshit. I think either way, it would have been a good team because I don't think Clay would have somehow derailed this roster
No,
and
definitely not.
yeah. So I don't think that there was like a wrong decision, and I think
Yep.
that it'll just be hindsight if people say,
Well,
well,
no,
it was always the best decision.
one of the wrong decisions would have been dropping Shotzi or
Yeah,
Hook.
but yeah, that wasn't gonna happen because I
Yeah,
think Hasher already said he spent so much money to buy
yeah,
out Shotzi from Splice. Hook has been with MV, like, although he went to Splice last year, he's basically been in MV for years. And I feel the same with Illy. It was like, he's either
yep.
going to be in Toronto because he lives there or something, or he's going to be with MV because of hashtag ZO. Like, you know. So I think just to kind of put a stamp on this, there was no wrong decision. I personally would have went with Clay because I don't know. I just really like Clay,
Yeah, I do
and
too.
that would have been it. But I don't think that Clay or Krim are bad leaders.
Nope, I don't think there was a wrong choice between the two, at least.
If there are no more questions, we can wrap up the pod. Thank you, Josh, for joining us late. Uh, but yeah, that wraps episode 2 of the Chall podcast. Um, so this episode will be on YouTube and Spotify within 8 or 9 hours. YouTube will take a little bit longer, and I'll schedule the Spotify to come out early next morning. We also have this podcast on all other platforms like Pocket Casts and these podcast specific platforms. The two big ones that they're not on is Google Podcasts and Apple Podcasts, but that will be changed within the next week or so. It's just taking a long time for the podcast to actually generate a feed on their platforms. But once they've been generated, it'll only take like a day or two for the new episodes to come out. So don't worry if it's not on there. Wait till next week. So YouTube and Spotify tomorrow, and then other platforms as the week goes on. Any last words, Bink?
Nope. Thanks as always for tuning in. For you guys who supported, looking forward to an exciting week at COD, and always remember to send the chow.
See you guys. Night. All right, good episode.